This is episode 218 of That Shakespeare Life. Our show this week is made available completely free and without any commercials, all thanks to support from listeners just like you who signed up to be our patron. You can support us on Patreon and unlock bonus benefits by signing up at patreon.com/thatshakespearelife. That's patreon.com/thatshakespearelife. Psst. Hey, it's me, Cassidy. I know Gary's already done the editing on the show for today, but I just had to jump in here to interrupt the program because I have a special announcement. Starting July 6th, I'm going to be starting my Zero to Podcasting Mastermind Group. It's a 1-year training intensive program where I will work with historians and humanities professionals that want to start their own successful podcast. I'll be walking them through step by step how to go from absolutely nothing but a desire to podcast all the way to successful business podcast platform that lets your passion for history work for you. I know this training program works because it's the exact step-by-step method I used to launch That Shakespeare Life. And it's the same method that's already worked for other students of mine who started out as listeners just like you. If you're sitting there wishing you had a successful podcast of your own, then come join us this year and let me show you how to make that dream a reality. Now, I'm only taking a handful of people because to work with you in this highly one-on-one personalized way, we're keeping the group super small and focused so that I can focus on making sure you get the results that you want. If you want to be in on my exclusive mastermind group and finally start that podcast you've been thinking about, then apply right now at CassidyCash.com/mastermind. Mastermind is all one word, so that's CassidyCash.com/mastermind. The deadline to get that application in is coming up fast. It's June 30th, and we won't be accepting applications after that date. So go ahead and apply right now. I hope I will see you inside. Okay, Gary, take them back to the show.
Catherine was very eager to meet with Elizabeth. Elizabeth was like, absolutely not interested in meeting with Catherine de Medici because Elizabeth doesn't really she likes traveling in her realm, but she doesn't travel outside of her realm.
Welcome to That Shakespeare Life with Cassidy Cash. Cassidy believes that if you desire to successfully learn or perform Shakespeare's plays, then understanding the real life and history of William Shakespeare himself is a must. That Shakespeare Life is the podcast that helps you go beyond the curtain of some of Shakespeare's most iconic works and explore the world of early modern England as Shakespeare would have lived it, learning from the writers, historians, and performers who know it best. And now, here's Cassidy.
Married to Henry Valois, Catherine de Medici held considerable power and influence over the Valois Dynasty of France and was a beloved daughter from the Medici Dynasty in Italy. The year William Shakespeare was born in 1564, Catherine de Medici offered her son Charles IX as a husband for Elizabeth I and would go on to offer her two other sons, Francis and Henry, to Elizabeth as husbands as well, in a decades-long effort to secure a political alliance through marriage with England. Staunchly opposed to marriage on the whole, Elizabeth I never did accept Catherine's sons as husbands, but the interactions and rivalry between these two powerful women was a mainstay over England for the formative years in Shakespeare's lifetime. Here today to help us explore the life of Catherine de Medici is our guest, historian, and author of the latest book about Catherine de Medici called Blood, Fire, and Gold, The Story of Elizabeth I of England and Catherine de Medici, Dr. Estelle Paranque. Dr. Estelle Paranque is an assistant professor in history at NCH at Northeastern London campus. She has participated in several international historical documentaries on TV, including BBC Two's The Boleyns: A Scandalous Family that aired in August of 2021, where she shared her knowledge of Anglo-French relations under Henry VIII's reign. She has also participated in Secret d'Histoire on France 2 and France 3, as well as the history podcasts History Hit, Not Just the Tudors, and Talking Tudors. She has extensively published on the Tudors and the Valois and is the author of Elizabeth I of England Through Valois Eyes and of the forthcoming book, Blood, Fire, and Gold, The Story of Elizabeth I of England and Catherine de Medici. This book is coming out in June of 2022. You can find links to Dr. Paranque's work as well as her books in the show notes for today's episode. Hello, Estelle. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Catherine de Medici's family was a noble family in Italy. So how did she come to have a ruling place in France?
Well, that's a very good question. Well, Catherine de Medici is a very complex character. She is from a noble family from Italy, from Florence, the Medici. She's the daughter of Lorenzo de Medici and of Madeleine de la Tour d'Auvergne, who is also a very powerful noble family, but in France. And so it does make sense that what's going to happen, the alliance between Francis I and the Pope, is going to happen because of that background from Catherine. So that's also, I think, look, people only see her as a Medici, only see her as an Italian princess, not princess, but, as an Italian woman, when actually she's half Italian, half French. So I think the xenophobia around her is quite interesting. I think that, sometimes, when you're a dual citizen, it's kind of funny, like the way people react to you, depending where you're coming from. So what happened to her was basically, she was from one of the most powerful Italian family, but her story and her fate is quite extraordinary in the sense that she was an orphan very quickly. She lost her mother 10 days after being born. She lost her father 3 weeks after. And then she was sent to relatives, her grandmother, her aunts, and then uncles. And her uncles were going to become popes, and which is absolutely what's going to basically change everything for her. She becomes really rapidly a pawn. Women are always used as pawns in the when I say that, I don't say that necessarily in a bad way. What I'm trying to explain is that usually women are used to make alliances, to make dynastic alliances, to make aristocratic alliances. And so it's exactly what's going to happen for this little girl. And she's an orphan, and yet it's what's going to happen for her. And Catherine de Medici is going to receive lots of proposals, but the Pope is going to make the deal with Francis I of France, and she's going to marry the second son of Francis, so not the firstborn, which is quite important as well, because it means that she was never meant to be queen. And so that's absolutely remarkable. And she arrived in Marseille in October 1533. She's going to be married to Henry of France, who's going to become Henry II, but at that time no one would have expected it. And she's going to fall in love with that boy. He's not going to fall in love with her. That's a tragedy of her life. That's probably something that we could discuss later or another podcast, I don't know. But he's not going to fall in love with her. But somehow this couple is going to become Dauphin and Dauphine of France. Henry's older brother is going to die. And then she becomes, the heir to the throne with her husband, obviously. So she became Queen Consort of France in 1547, when Francis I is going to die. And what's amazing is that at that time, as a Queen Consort, you don't have much power. She definitely didn't have much power. Her influence over her husband is going to grow, especially towards the end of his reign, around 1557, even 1556. I think he's going to realize that she's actually more clever than he thought she was. And, some people take some time to really understand others and to see what they have in front of them. And Catherine is that. Catherine is not the Renaissance beauty. She's not what you expect from a princess, the ideal princess. She's obviously not a princess, she's not royal blood, but still, there's this princess-like that she has to convey. And she's absolutely doesn't have any attributes that you would see, that people would seek, like sometimes, blonde, blue eyes was something that, were really praised during the Renaissance. She was called fat. She was not fat. But there was this idea that she was far from being perfect. However, soon people were also commenting, especially during her husband's reign and during Francis I's reign, they love her humility. They love that she's so docile. They love that she's so, she's really the perfect, devoted wife. She accepts her husband's mistress. So we really have a woman who knows from a very young age how to play the games of the court. And what's interesting is that because she lost everyone very young, she didn't receive that type of education. Very soon she understood danger. And by understanding danger, she understood the rules of the games of court, because it's all about danger. It's all about survival. And Catherine de Medici really, really understood that from a very, very young age.
So we know that Elizabeth I and Catherine de Medici had a significant amount of correspondence between each other, but did they ever actually meet in person?
Actually, they never did, but it's as you said, like they exchanged a lot of letters to one another. And what's very interesting is that Catherine was very eager to meet with Elizabeth. Elizabeth was like absolutely not interested in meeting with Catherine Medici because Elizabeth doesn't really she likes traveling in her realm, but she doesn't travel outside of her realm. We have a different type of personality with Catherine, who obviously came from Italy to go to France. She went to the border of Spain to see her daughter, Elizabeth of Valois. So obviously we have like a very different approach to maybe early modern travel or the possibility to meet other people. And Catherine was asking, especially when there were like marriage negotiations, which we're going to discuss in more depth. But Catherine was then, we could meet in Dover. I could come to Dover. It's only like 3 hours or like whatever like she thought it was going to be. And she thought we're very like our realms are only separated from, just a bit of water. It's nothing. We can still meet and we can still discuss things in person. And what I find really funny about these myths, around queens or kings that meet or don't meet, is the fact that I do believe that history would have been different if those political characters had actually met. It would have been quite interesting to see what type of relationship they would have built after a meeting. Because, for example, if we take like Henry VIII and Francis I, so Henry VIII of England and Francis I of France, they did meet twice. And that's quite remarkable and incredible for the period. And we know that it did influence their relationship there. We call it a bromance almost. And some, that it's a rivalry, like they fall out. It's a brotherly love. And I think it's really because of what happened, because they had the opportunity to look into each other's eyes.
Comparatively, the religious climate in France was much more fraught than it was in England. The English saw a strict imposition of Protestantism and strong laws against Catholics, while in France, the French Huguenots who followed the teachings of John Calvin were persecuted and slaughtered by the French Catholic government. Estelle, how were Elizabeth I and Catherine de Medici able to have this rapport with one another when they both so strongly opposed the religion of the other person?
Well, that's very interesting, Cassidy. But first of all, I think that what you have to remember is that there's a difference between personal views and political policies that you're going to make in your country to be able to rule. That's one thing. So, for example, for Elizabeth, first of all, the persecution of Catholics didn't really happen before 1570, after she was excommunicated. So that's an important point to say. She did, I think it's very hard for scholars, even today, historians, there are debates around Elizabeth I's faith. And I can understand it because when you look at her personal prayers and you look at her personal letters, it's very hard to, of course, you would see the influence of reformed ideas. It would not be as clear as you think it could be. It's probably not as clear as Edward VI ideas, because we have his diary. So we do know that he was extremely Protestant. We don't have that with Elizabeth. She is in the middle. She believes in God. She believes in Jesus Christ. And the rest for her didn't really matter. But what mattered to her was a complete allegiance to her. So the problem was, obviously, the Catholics didn't recognize the marriage of Anne Boleyn and Henry VIII and contested her legitimacy to be on the throne. That's where she had a problem. And that's where her policies had to be changed in 1570 and after that, and where there were persecutions of Catholics and everything. For Catherine de Medici, same, people have this image of a very stern anti-Protestant queen. That is not the truth. Of course, she was. I'm not saying she was not ultra-Catholic herself. She was extremely Catholic. She comes from Italy. Her background, her education, like 100% Catholic. But Catherine was also a woman who was practical. And for her, the most important thing was to rule with her sons, or for her sons to rule, depending on which year we're looking at. So for her, it was the stability of the realm, the most important thing. That's why there's absolutely a myth that she has anything to do with the St. Bartholomew's Day massacre in 1572. We have no proof whatsoever. It comes from the black legend of Catherine de Medici, and that has been created mostly by people who are xenophobic and who probably misogynistic as well. So it's all of that is around her. So then it's not, I think Catherine and Elizabeth, the problem of religion, the problem that one was Protestant and one was Catholic, was not that important. That's actually not what really caused their differences at the end of Catherine's life. Obviously, they're going to use those differences to create even more, rivalry between the two. But that is actually, they're just pretext. It's not what's really at the heart of the problem of their rivalry, for example. It grew for other reasons. And I actually think that both of them, Catherine was happy, more than happy, for any of her sons to marry Elizabeth, and for Elizabeth to remain Protestant, for the country to remain Protestant, and for her sons to remain Catholic. So they were both trying to be, I think, to appease the other side, very much so. And but then the policies that happen in their countries is very different. It has nothing to do with their personal belief, I think, and it has to do with how do I rule a country. And for Catherine de Medici, the wars of religion just got out of control. It's not, when you really look at her and her power of decision, is she really enjoying having so many Protestants in our country? No. Does she wish that they were all converting to Catholicism? Yes. But she was also happy to make compromises when she realized that that was not going to happen. So a very complex matter, very complex personalities, and very complex faith.
In the book, The Contending Kingdoms, author Susan Doran writes that, quote, the English state papers make clear that Queen Elizabeth and her ambassadors took Catherine de Medici very seriously as a major political player, end quote. Estelle, why is it surprising that Catherine was taken seriously by the English, and particularly Elizabeth I? Is it because England and France were tense politically? They're relatively recently coming off the 100 Years' War. So I think it's quite surprising to see these two trying to work together.
Well, it is and it is not. And it's not just about the 100 Years' War. It's about the Italian wars that ravaged Europe in the first part of the 16th century. That's where it's going to create problems between Elizabeth and Catherine. But the fact that the English ambassadors or Elizabeth I are going to take seriously Catherine de Medici is absolutely not surprising, given that Catherine positioned herself as Queen Mother of France, Mother of Kings. So I think it's quite important here to realize that there is almost like a weird relationship going on between the English ambassadors and Catherine de Medici, because they know that she's not the Queen Regnant, but they also know that she's very much influential. So let's not forget, from 1560 to 1563, she's actually acting as regent. Then from 1563 until the end of her life, I would say that from 1563 up to probably 1568, 69, Charles IX really let his mother in power and make all the decisions for him, or more or less. Like they might have, discussions, but she's really the one who has the upper hand in their relationship. Then when he grows up, obviously you can imagine when you start being 20, you're like, Mom, you're embarrassing me. Could you please stop? And so we have this kind of dynamic, and he becomes more interested in power himself, but his mother is still in Privy Council, is still a very important counselor. Everyone, there's no audience without her, and no official audience without her. He might have sometimes audiences without her, but with her blessing. You can do this, my son. You're allowed to rule without me. With Henry III, we have a total different dynamic. He's an adult when he became King of France. It's 1574, but he massively respects his mother. He massively respects her ideas and her opinions. And though they do have a little fallout at some point because she wished he did things differently, they still worked together, right? He was still listening to her, but she was one of political advisors. But because she built so much power, so much influence, for 14 years, from 1560 to 1574, it meant that people had massive respect for her, knew that if they wanted to talk to Henry III about something, it might be sometimes better to approach it with Catherine first. And so she just became like a very significant political player. And it's what she had always wanted, to be fair, because the game where she was like a devoted, humble, quiet wife, it was just a game, it was just a ploy. Catherine de Medici was a very smart, sharp, astute woman who knew and who understood how sometimes to manipulate and to lie to get what she wanted, like Elizabeth.
Yeah, so they had at least that in common. In 1564, Catherine de Medici offered her son Charles IX as husband for Queen Elizabeth I. Estelle, why did Catherine extend this offer, and what motivated Elizabeth to refuse?
Well, so if the marriage negotiations are going to start in 1564 with Charles IX. And the reason for it is that Catherine really, really wants an alliance with England. She thinks it's absolutely ridiculous to have a single woman on the throne. She doesn't even understand Elizabeth's decision to remain single. She truly believed that power for women only came through having sons. And you have this idea that she would push on Elizabeth repeatedly in letters. Obviously, something that really annoyed Elizabeth, because she saw the opposite. She thought that power should come from yourself. But Elizabeth was weird in this way, because she thought that only her could do it, because she was not like any other woman. She was an extraordinary woman. And so she understood that why people would see her as different. And actually, I think she enjoyed that. She enjoyed like being the one who didn't want to conform to what was expected from women. But for Catherine, she's going to pursue Elizabeth on behalf of all her sons. So we have 1564 with Charles IX. It's going to be shut down by Elizabeth saying he's too young for her. Then she's right, she's 13 or something. And she's like,
he was 13?
Yeah, he's 13, 14.
Really young.
And she's like 30 something. So it's 32, 33. So it's quite ridiculous. She really thinks it's ridiculous. But then Catherine is not a woman you can say no to. So then she tries again when he's older. So she thought like what she meant was like he was too young. She didn't understand that what she meant was really the gap between them that she didn't like.
Not too young at the moment, too young for Elizabeth.
Well, I mean, Elizabeth made it herself clear, but I think Catherine chose not to understand that part. And in 1568, 1569, she pushes again. And Elizabeth, again, is saying no. But then she offers in 1570 Henry, who was going to become Henry III, but at the time he was just, the Dauphin of France. And when she saw a portrait, she was like, oh, actually, this one is quite yummy. So maybe I could make, an exception. But Henry is the one who's definitely not going to want to marry a Protestant queen. So we have a big difference between at the moment. So it's the negotiations are almost lost really quickly between 1570 71. And then there's the third son, Francis, Duke of Alençon, and then Duke of Anjou in 1576, who is the one that Elizabeth is really going to consider. And what I mean by that is that personally, I think Elizabeth always knew she wanted to remain single, because for her, she didn't want to share power and she didn't want to put herself at risk. But I think with Francis, she probably enjoyed his company. And also I think that when she got older and realized, it's almost like when you've said no all your life. Actually, it's one of a poem, When I Was Fair and Young. And the poem is like, when I was fair and young and I attracted, I'm paraphrasing, obviously it's not what she's saying, but exactly word for word, but she's saying, when I was fair and young, I was, everyone was drawn to me and I had many proposals. And then when I'm no longer fair and young, everyone forgets about me, kind of thing. So it's kind of like the poem. And I think for Elizabeth, towards the end of it, when it's her last shot, when it's like the last moment of her being pursued. You have to imagine that this woman had been pursued all her life by different suitors. And there's still this Francis, in 1580, 1581, still like, oh, but I like you and I enjoy your company. And I think she almost believed him. And I think he was actually honest that he liked her company. I think they had lots of fun together. We have I can imagine. I think they probably had a similar sense of humor. We do see them all the time together because he went to see her in person. The only suitor, foreigner who went to see her. Well, he's not the only one, but he's the one who made it twice and who spent lots of time with her. And I think that at some point she could have been, maybe she was drunk or something. She made a promise. Maybe she had too much wine or beer, I don't know. And she made a promise that she would actually marry him. And then the next day she said, oh, obviously it was a mistake and that she didn't mean it. But he's extremely hurt. And he threatened her. It's all in my book, but he threatened her to reveal all her letters, all her personal letters to him, showing that she had great affection to him. And then she's like absolutely outraged about this and can't believe that he would do something like this. And so you have a bit of a fallout, and then he leaves, and obviously there's no marriage. But for Catherine, there's still hope that because they were so close to it in 1581 that might be still be her. But obviously that's not going to happen. Elizabeth is the Virgin Queen in the end. So, she didn't marry, didn't have children.
After the invasion of the Spanish Armada, England returned their support for the Huguenots, and Henry Navarre is fighting for the throne in France. Estelle, how did the rise of Henry Navarre impact the legacy of Catherine de Medici?
Well, I think, so as Catherine de Medici dies before the fall of her own son, Henry III, the last Valois, male Valois, I think it's quite good that she didn't see the assassination of her son. And I think that in terms of legacy, Henry of Navarre, to thrive with the new dynasty, the Bourbon, or the Bourbons, like saying the English, but Bourbon in French. When you have a new dynasty, you have to kind of demonize the one before you. You either do that or you try to build upon the old dynasty, like, for example, the Stuart with the Tudors and then the Hanover with the Stuarts. But here, we have more of a conflict because we have different religions as well, until obviously Henry of Navarre is going to convert to Catholicism. But he does that as a political move, not as a religious faith. His religious faith, I don't think it ever changed. He was brought up as a Protestant, and I think he died in his heart as a Protestant, if we can say. But I think then the legacy of Catherine de Medici, I think Catherine had to be demonized for Henry of Bourbon, Henry of Navarre, and Henry IV of France, the same man here, for him to be seen as the one who's going to reunite the Protestants and the Catholics. So the Valois, basically Catherine and her sons, are going to be vilified in pamphlets, vilified in books, vilified. They were the bad ones. They were the ones who let France bleed, and they were the ones who let the religious civil wars, ravage France. And he's the one who's going to try to find a compromise. He's the hero that France was waiting for. So if you have a hero, you need villains. And it was really easy for him because the villains were dead. So they could not defend themselves. And that's where we have this black legend of Catherine de Medici, which my book is really trying to, not just my book, let me be honest here, there are other scholars who have worked on that before and try to, reassess Catherine's reputation. But my book is also doing that through another lens, the complex relationship with Elizabeth I, who was glorified herself. So yes, I think that's the legacy.
Now, I know we would love to explore the history of Catherine de Medici further, and obviously we will link to your book as the best place to start when exploring Catherine de Medici. But what are some of your favorite books or resources you can recommend in addition to your book? If we are brand new to the study of this part of history, where should we begin?
So if you're interested in Catherine de Medici, and if you wanted to have more on her and not just a relationship with Elizabeth I, I cannot recommend enough Leonie Frida, Catherine de Medici. As simple as that. It's a great book. It is packed with interesting research, and it just does justice to Catherine. Now, if you're interested in Elizabeth I, I would recommend the latest book by Carol Levin, The Reign of Elizabeth, I think it's just out, or it's going to be out very soon. So just check, on on Amazon or wherever you like to buy your books from. And if you're interested in the dynasty of the Valois, which is a long dynasty, it's a big dynasty, but the ones that were ruling under Elizabeth, like at the same time as Elizabeth I, then I would recommend my other book, actually, Elizabeth. I hope it's okay.
Yes,
Elizabeth I through Valois eyes, and it's my first. It's an academic book, so it might be sometimes harder to enter into it. It gives you an understanding of the relationship between Elizabeth and not just Catherine, but her sons. So the focus is more on the sons of Catherine and Elizabeth. But I would say those three to first Leonie Frieda, definitely, if you want to know more about Catherine and you don't really know enough. Then Carol Levin, this new book on the life and reign of Elizabeth, is really like, you have everything you need to know about it. Like, it's almost like it's I would say it's almost the perfect biography. I don't want to be too much, because some people can always write biographies, but it's an amazing one. So yeah,
those are excellent resources for sure. We will link to these in the show notes, so make sure you hang on for the link for where to find those. Now, Estelle, we ask everyone this next question here at That Shakespeare Life, and that's, what's the one book you would take with you on a deserted island? My friends in England tell me I'm supposed to allow you the complete works of Shakespeare and a copy of the Bible, so your choice would be in addition to those.
Okay, so you're going to think it's really weird, so it's not a history book, but I would go with What I Know for Sure by Oprah Winfrey. It's my favorite book. It's my own Bible. It's the one that grounds me. It's the one that resonates in me. It's the one that makes me reflect on myself, helps me grow, helps me understand where my failures are, my fears, also my hopes. And it just gives me this boost of positivity and faith. But for me, it's not faith, religious faith. It's more of faith in myself, faith in my fate. Yeah, What I Know for Sure by Oprah Winfrey.
Well, I think a book that brings you positivity and faith is a great selection for your desert island, for sure. Yeah. So what's next for you? What are you working on now that you're excited about?
I'm working on so many projects. So obviously I'm an academic, so I'm working on academic projects, doing another trade book as well. So like, all I can tell you is I'm still working on queens, but also on powerful women. I have this obsession, I think, with women and power. The fact that I'm interested, I'm fascinated in the ways in which, women would, maneuver in patriarchal societies. So yeah, that I hope I'll never stop working on that, because I absolutely love reading about this and doing research and writing about these women. So.
Well, as delightful and fascinating as your book on Catherine de Medici is, I know we're looking forward to following your work and seeing what's next. Dr. Estelle Paranque, thank you so much for being here and walking us through the history of Catherine de Medici and her relationship to Elizabeth I during the life of William Shakespeare. This was a fun conversation. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much, Cassidy.
Be sure to leave us a comment and rating on your favorite podcast platform to let other listeners know where they can learn something new about Shakespeare. Find more information on our guest today in the show notes for today's episode. There you'll find links to Dr. Estelle Paranque's latest book, Blood, Fire, and Gold, all about the relationship between Elizabeth I and Catherine de Medici. The book is set to publish in June of this year, and pre-orders are available now. Find links to these and a few extra history tidbits about our topic today at CassidyCash.com/episode 218. That's CassidyCash.com/EP218. There are visual companions to our show this week, things like woodcuts, portraits, museum artifacts, diagrams, and more, available inside the detailed show notes available to our patrons. Access these on the regular show notes page using the orange Patreon button. When you click it and log in using your Patreon credentials, it will immediately expand all of the extras. You can join as a patron using that button as well and get access to coordinating visual content for all of our shows, as well as behind-the-scenes history research that goes into the making of our episodes. Explore all the benefits and sign up today at patreon.com/thatshakespearelife. That's it for this week. Thank you for listening. I'm Cassidy Cash, and I hope you learned something new about the Bard. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to That Shakespeare Life. As always, the best conversations happen after the episode over at CassidyCash.com. Become a part of a vibrant Shakespeare conversation by adding your voice over at the website. Until next time, remember, when you want to know William Shakespeare, you have to go behind the curtain and into that Shakespeare life.